This is a satay that I make in my house quite regularly. It's very simple. It's a great midweek meal. My kids love it. There's something I think about adding peanut butter to anything that makes kids like. All right, so the first thing, I've got cumin, coriander, and some black peppercorns. They just need to be toasted. Put your whole spices in. I need all of my cumin, all of my coriander. So I've got about a tablespoon of cumin, a tablespoon of coriander, and then just a pinch of black peppercorns. I just want to cook those until basically you can smell them. So what you're doing with whole spices is in a spice, there's lots of oil, and when they sit in the cupboard or they're in your container, they're sort of dormant. So when you put heat into an oil, the oil expands, it starts moving around, and that's what we're trying to get. So as soon as we can smell cumin, coriander, and peppercorn in the air, we'll turn that off, put it into a pestle and mortar, grind it up, and then we've got some ground cayenne pepper there. So we'll use that as well as the base for our sauce. We're just gonna wait until that dry toast, then we'll grind it, then we can get on with making our satay sauce. Now that our spices are ground, we can start preparing our chicken. So chicken thigh is best for, well, I think it's best for this satay because we're going to cook the satay, or it's going to bubble along for probably 20 minutes. You can get away with using chicken thigh because that 20-minute cooking time will help tenderize the thigh, but there's so much more flavor in a chicken thigh than the breast that if you're going to, I think if your chicken meat's going to be cooked in a sauce, you're best to use the thigh because the flavor that you get that comes off the bottom of the pan when you deglaze goes into that sauce, and because you're cooking it in the sauce, you're sort of braising it as well. Just a little bit of oil, we don't need a lot because there is a little bit of chicken fat on those thighs and that will come out when we cook it. We want to cook that until there's some really good colour on the outside of our chicken thigh. So 10 minutes, so you want a really sort of dark brown colour on the outside, and once we've got that, we'll throw our spices back in, cook those spices off, and then start to build our sauce around those chicken pieces. Once my chicken got some really good colour on it, I've added my spices, the spices that we dry roasted, and then I've chopped 2 tomatoes and 1 red onion and popped that in. Now, I'm using fresh tomato. If you wanted sort of a richer, more intense satay, use tomato paste instead of fresh tomato. I just like the fresh tomato. And then I've got some thyme, which we'll just roughly chop. And I've used sort of the young part of the thyme so that I can just sort of chop it, I don't have to pick the leaves off. And then there are 2 options here. You can use cayenne pepper, which we've got there, some ground cayenne, or fresh chilli. Again, I want a fresh satay, so I'm using fresh chilli instead of the ground cayenne pepper. And you can think of the difference that will create if you use tomato paste and cayenne pepper. It's going to be sort of a much more sort of rich and intense satay rather than sort of a fresh light satay, which is what I'm going for. All right, stir all that in. We add our peanut butter now. And really, the amount of peanut butter you add is up to you. It depends on how rich, again, you want it to be or how satay you want it to be. I'm adding 1/3 of a cup, but there's no reason why you couldn't add 1/2 a cup or even 3/4 of a cup and have it sort of be really, really, really rich. And then the final ingredient, which is sort of the peanut butter will give it the creaminess that we want, but the sauce really comes from stock. And most sauces, when you're braising, come from stock. So you want a good quality stock, which is what we've got here in the Massel. Australian made stock, fantastic quality. Again, you wouldn't be able to make a better stock at home. So for all the time and effort that goes into making a stock at home, go with a good quality stock like Massel, and you're going to be well ahead on time and saving as well. The amount of ingredients that you have to buy to create a home stock, when you can buy one you can keep in the fridge and just use it at your leisure, that's the way to go. All right, so now it's just a matter of simmering this away. That will thicken as it reduces, and then just top it up with stock as you need to. Once we get to the end of that, add a little squeeze of lime juice and then it's ready to serve. My satay is at the consistency that I want. I just want to taste it. Again, with a good stock, you will need to taste for salt. So I think that's the difference between a good stock and a bad stock is good stocks aren't overly seasoned. Bad stocks are really salty, and that's a lot of the time how they get away with adding flavour. They reduce it too much, trying to intensify the flavour, and it just gets too salty. So just check for seasoning. Although I did season the chicken at the beginning, so that does have salt added to it. Good. So I add my rice to a bowl. Just a pure basmati, my favourite rice. Very simple satay that can be pimped if you want to.